3 days before Christmas in 2024, Seattle was wrapped in winter's quiet charm. Snow blanketed the sidewalks, shop windows glowed with strings of lights, and faint carols drifted from cars crawling through the frosty streets. I pushed open the door to my Fremont apartment, the cold still biting at my fingertips. I'd just come from a long day at the therapy office, my head heavy with the stories I'd carried for others. I shrugged off my coat, kicked my boots to the side, and glanced at the corner of the room. My suitcase sat there, neatly packed. A soft ivory scarf, hand-knitted, was folded on top, next to a small pile of gifts I'd spent weeks choosing. A rare poetry collection for Mom, artisanal coffee beans for Dad, a leather-bound sketch pad for my sister Sophia, each one wrapped with care, each one a silent wish that this year I'd finally fit in. I sank onto the couch, the radiators hum warming the air, when my phone buzzed. Sophia's name flashed on the screen. My younger sister, always a burst of color and chaos. I answered with a tired smile. "Hey, Soph," I said, my voice soft, but her words were sharp, like she'd been practicing them. "Maya, about Christmas. We think you should sit this one out. Ethan's coming, and we just want it to feel light, you know?" The words hit like ice. Ethan, her new boyfriend, the one who smirked when I talked about my work as a therapist. Before I could find my voice, Mom called. Her tone was polished, almost kind. "Sweetheart, Ethan's sensitive. Your job, all that trauma stuff, it's heavy. If you come, it could make things awkward. You get it, right?" I stood frozen, phone in hand, staring at the gifts I'd wrapped with trembling hope. The lights on my secondhand Christmas tree flickered, suddenly too faint. My family didn't want me, not for who I was, but for who they decided I'd become. Too serious, too intense, too much. In that quiet, snow-dusted moment, something inside me began to unravel. That night, as the snow fell outside my window, I stood in my apartment, the phone still warm in my hand. The sting of Sophia's words and Mom's polished rejection lingered, like a bruise. I'm Maya Torres, 34 years old, a therapist in Seattle. My life is a patchwork of late nights, messy curls tied back in a rush, and oversized sweaters in shades of sage and rust. My office is a cozy nook downtown, filled with plants and soft cushions, where I sit with people unraveling their grief, their fears, their quiet hopes. I love my work, the way a single conversation can shift someone's world, the way listening can be a kind of medicine. But it's heavy, and I carry it home, tucked into the corners of my thoughts. Maybe that's why my family decided I was too much. Growing up, I was the steady one, the eldest, the one who made sure the bills were paid and the fridge was stocked. My parents, Rosa and Miguel, leaned on me without ever saying it. Mom, 60, a retired teacher, always chased perfection, her house spotless, her holiday dinners a performance. Dad, 62, a car mechanic with calloused hands, was quieter, but his pride always shone for Sophia, my younger sister, who sparkled like him. Sophia's 28 now, a free-spirited artist who paints murals and chases dreams that never quite land. She's the golden child, the one whose failures were called creative, while my successes were just expected. I remember being 16, balancing the family checkbook while Mom planned Sophia's 10th birthday party, complete with a piñata and a homemade cake. When I graduated high school, I left my college acceptance letter on the kitchen counter, hoping for a moment of pride. Mom glanced at it, said, "That's a lot of work, Maya. Don't burn out," and went back to grading Sophia's watercolor sketches. Years later, when I opened my own therapy practice, Dad nodded and said, "Sounds stressful." But when Sophia dropped out of art school to find herself, they threw her a welcome home dinner with candles and wine. Her half-finished canvases propped up like trophies. For years, I thought that's what love was, showing up, fixing things, being useful. I paid for the new roof when a storm tore through their house. I sent Sophia money when her gigs dried up. No questions asked. I spent hours on the phone sorting out Dad's insurance paperwork when his shop hit hard times. They never said thank you. They didn't need to. In their world, my role was like air, necessary, invisible, assumed. I told myself it was enough, that being dependable made me belong. But standing there, the weight of their rejection sinking in, I saw it clearly. I wasn't celebrated. I was tolerated until I wasn't. I thought of the research paper I'd published last year, a piece on trauma recovery that got picked up by a journal. I'd left a copy at their house, hoping they'd read it. Weeks later, I found it in the recycling bin, buried under coffee grounds and junk mail. "We thought it was scrap," Mom said with a laugh. Scrap. Maybe that's what I was to them, too. All those years, I'd poured myself into their cracks, missed payments, broken plans, late-night emergencies, believing if I gave enough, they'd see me. Not just the therapist, not just the fixer, but Maya, the girl who loved poetry, who sketched Puget Sound at dawn, who dreamed of being enough without having to prove it. The snow outside kept falling, soft and relentless, muffling the cities. I looked at the Christmas gifts I'd wrapped, their ribbons curling like promises I'd made to people who never kept theirs. My whole life, I'd been the one holding things together, the scaffolding for a family that only noticed me when something broke. And now they'd built their holiday without me, as if I'd never been there at all. In that moment, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, feeling the truth settle like frost. I had never been enough for them, because I had never been allowed to be. The silence in my apartment was deafening that night, the kind that presses against your chest. Sophia's words, "We just want it to feel light," echoed in my head, tangled with Mom's smooth excuse about Ethan's sensitivity. I set my phone down, its screen still glowing with their betrayal, and looked at the Christmas gifts I'd spent weeks choosing. Each one felt like a plea I'd made to a family that never answered. I'd done everything right, hadn't I? The poetry book for Mom, the coffee for Dad, the sketch pad for Sophia. I'd remembered every detail, every preference, hoping this year I'd be more than the fixer, more than the one they called when things fell apart. But I wasn't. I was just too much, or maybe not enough. I thought about all the years I'd poured myself into them. When a storm ripped through their neighborhood 3 winters ago, the roof of their house caved in. Insurance wouldn't cover it, so I paid for the repairs, dipping into my savings without a second thought. When Sophia's art gigs dried up last year, her rent unpaid for months, I sent her money. No questions asked, even when my own bills were piling up. When Dad's auto shop hit a rough patch and the bank threatened to foreclose, I spent nights on the phone, negotiating payment plans, sorting out paperwork. I loved them. Or maybe I believed love was something you earned by being useful, by showing up with solutions when everyone else had excuses. They never said thank you. Not once. Not when I drove across town to pick Sophia up from a failed gallery, opening, her mascara streaked with tears. Not when I sat with Mom, walking her through tax forms she didn't understand, my own work waiting untouched on my desk. Not when I paid for Dad's physical therapy after a back injury, scheduling appointments he never would have made himself. In their world, my help was like the tide, expected, constant, unremarkable. I'd told myself it was fine, that family meant carrying the weight so others could shine. But standing there, the snow falling outside like a curtain closing, I saw it for what it was. I wasn't their daughter, their sister. I was their safety net, only noticed when it frayed. I moved slowly, like I was waking from a long sleep. I opened my laptop, the screen's glow harsh against the dim room. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, steady but deliberate. I logged into my bank account and found the automatic transfers I'd set up years ago, the monthly payment for their mortgage, the emergency fund I'd created for Sophia's art projects, the health insurance I'd been covering for Dad. I stared at the numbers, each one a piece of myself I'd given away, not out of anger, not out of guilt, but out of a desperate hope that if I gave enough, they'd see me. They never did. With a few clicks, I canceled them all. The mortgage payment, gone. Sophia's fund, locked. Dad's insurance, terminated. It wasn't rage driving me. It was clarity, sharp and cold as the December air. I was done believing that love was a transaction, that being dependable would earn me a place at their table. I closed the laptop and stood by the window, watching the snow pile up, soft and relentless. The city was hushed, wrapped in white, and for the first time I felt something new. Not pain, not sadness, but relief. A quiet, trembling freedom, like a bird realizing the cage door was never locked. I turned to the Christmas gifts, their bright paper mocking me now. I didn't rip them apart or throw them away. I just gathered them, one by one, and slid them into the hall closet, their ribbons catching on the doorframe like afterthoughts. The tree in the corner, strung with second-hand ornaments, felt like a stranger's. I unplugged its lights, letting the room fall into shadow. This Christmas, I wouldn't show up. I wouldn't call, wouldn't beg, wouldn't press my face to the window of a family that had already closed the curtains. I'd spent my life trying to fit into their story, shrinking myself to slip through the cracks. But that night, I stopped trying. I let the silence speak for me. Outside, the snow kept falling, each flake a small erasure of the paths I'd walked, to please them. I wrapped my hands around a mug of tea, the steam curling like a promise. I didn't know what came next, but I knew one thing. I was done carrying a family that had never carried me. For the first time, I wondered what it would feel narrowed to be Maya, not the therapist, not the fixer, but just me. And in that snow-dusted quiet, I started to believe I might find out. The days after I canceled those payments felt strange, like I'd stepped out of my own life and into someone else's. Christmas morning came, gray and soft, the Seattle skyline blurred behind a veil of snow. I sat by my window, wrapped in a blanket that smelled of lavender and home, a mug of ginger tea warming my hands. The apartment was quiet. No carols, no buzzing phone, no clatter of family chaos. The gifts I'd packed for them stayed hidden. In the closet, their shiny paper a reminder of a hope I'd finally let go. I didn't call. I didn't text. I just let the silence hold me, steady and whole, like the breath you take after holding it too long. Across town, I pictured their house, glowing with lights, the table heavy with Mom's tamales and Sophia's laughter. They'd built their holiday without me, as if my absence was just a minor edit to their perfect story. But I wasn't there to smooth the edges, to cover the cracks, to make things easy. And for the first time, I wondered what their world looked like without me holding it up. I didn't hear from them until the evening, when the sky had turned a bruised purple and the snow fell thicker. My phone buzzed, not with a holiday greeting, but with a text from my Aunt Clara, the only one who still sent me handwritten cards. "Maya, what happened? They're saying you ruined Christmas." I stared at the words, my heart stuttering. Ruined. I hadn't even been there. Another text followed, then a call. Clara's voice was gentle, cautious, like she was tiptoeing around something fragile. "They're upset, mija, but you weren't even at the gathering. What's going on?" She pieced it together for me, her words halting, like she was still making sense of it herself. At the Christmas dinner, everything had seemed fine at first. The house was warm, the music bright, the table a showcase of Mom's cooking. But then Ethan, Sophia's boyfriend, wandered to the living room, where a faded photo hung on the wall. It was me, 12 years old, grinning in a too-big sweater at a birthday party, my hair a mess of curls. He tilted his head, studying it, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "That's Maya, right?" The therapist who helped run those free mental health workshops at the community center? The room went still. Forks paused midair. Glasses stopped clinking. Sophia's smile faltered, and Mom's eyes darted to Dad, who looked away. Ethan, oblivious, kept going. She's incredible. Those workshops saved people. My friend was one of them. She even funded most of it herself, didn't she? No one answered. The silence grew heavy, sharp, like glass underfoot. Ethan looked around, confusion creeping into his voice. Wait, Maya's your sister, right? Why isn't she here? Whatever they mumbled, some half-truth about me being busy or needing space, wasn't enough. Ethan's face changed. He set down his drink, thanked them with a politeness that cut deeper than anger, and walked out, Sophia trailing after him, her voice tight with panic. By the time Clara called me, the fallout had already begun. Ethan, who volunteered at the same community center where I'd poured my heart into those workshops, posted something on LinkedIn. It wasn't loud or vicious, just honest. A few lines about how families sometimes erase the people who give the most, how silence can be a kind of betrayal, how someone like Maya deserved better than being forgotten. The post spread like wildfire in Seattle's tight-knit nonprofit and art scenes. Friends shared it, colleagues commented, donors for Sophia's. Upcoming mural projects started pulling out, whispering about family drama they didn't want tied to their names. The perfect image my family had curated, the artistic daughter, the warm holiday gatherings, cracked open, and they couldn't look away. The next day, my phone lit up with messages. An email from Mom, Dad, and Sophia, titled, "Let's Talk." It was formal, almost corporate, full of vague phrases about holiday stress and misunderstandings. Buried in the middle was the real ask. Could you reach out to Ethan? Clear things up? Sophia's project is at risk. Not an apology, not a question about how I was, just another problem for me to fix. Then they showed up at my apartment, unannounced, bundled in coats, their smiles thin and practiced. I looked through the peephole, my heart steady but heavy. Mom's voice came through the door, soft, coated in something meant to sound like love. Maya, we just want to talk. We're family. Sophia's eyes were red, Dad's jaw tight with impatience. I opened the door a crack, just enough for the cold to slip through. Their faces softened, expecting the old Maya, the one who'd smooth things over, who'd say yes to keep the peace. But that Maya was gone. I looked at them, their desperation louder than their words, and said one thing. Enough. No explanations, no apologies, just a boundary, clear and final. Mom's face crumpled, part shock, part disbelief, like she couldn't fathom I'd stopped playing my role. Sophia's mouth opened, then closed. Dad shifted, his eyes flickering with something like anger. I closed the door, not with a slam, but with a quiet click, and walked back to my tea, now cold on the counter. The silence that followed was different, not empty, but full, like the air after a storm. I stood by the window, watching the snow, bury the world outside. They didn't want me back. They wanted the version of me who paid the bills, who cleaned up their messes, who stayed quiet so their story could shine. But I was done being their scaffolding. And in that moment, I realized the sharpest truth isn't always what you say. Sometimes it's the silence you leave behind, the space you refuse to fill. The days after I closed that door felt like stepping into a new kind of quiet. Not the heavy silence of rejection, but a stillness that felt like mine. The snow kept falling outside my Seattle apartment, blanketing the world in a hush that matched the calm settling in my chest. I didn't light the Christmas tree again. I didn't unpack the gifts I'd hidden in the closet. They sat there, colorful and untouched, like relics of a version of me who still believed love could be earned with ribbon and care. But there was no sadness in letting them go, just clarity, like the first deep breath after a long cry. I went back to work, slipping into the rhythm of my therapy office. I sat with clients who carried their own invisible weights, grief, fear, hope, and I listened, the way I always had. Some came with flowers from their families, others with empty chairs where loved ones used to sit. I stayed with them all, holding space for their stories, just as I was learning to hold space for my own. The hospital lights, the hum of the city, the soft creak of my office chair. They grounded me. I was Maya, not the fixer, not the scaffolding, just a woman who showed up for the work that mattered. A week later, a small package arrived at my door. No return address, just my name scrawled in neat, slanted handwriting on brown paper. I opened it carefully, finding a single sheet of thick ivory stationery inside, the ink slightly smudged at the edges. It was from Daniel, a client I'd worked with 2 years ago, a man who'd lost his brother and nearly himself to the weight of that grief. His words were simple, deliberate, pressed into the page with care. "You didn't just help me survive, Maya. You showed me I was still worth saving, even when no one else saw it. I'm writing this from a new city, a new life. Thank you for staying." I read it 3 times, my fingers tracing the letters, and that night, I hung the letter above my desk, where the morning light could touch it. It wasn't just a note. It was proof I'd never been invisible, not to the people who truly saw me. My family didn't stop reaching out. Emails came, less polished now, edged with desperation. "We miss you, Maya. Can we start over?" But buried in the lines, like a splinter under skin, was always the real reason: Sophia's losing sponsors. "Can you talk to Ethan?" Not remorse, not love, just another mess they expected me to clean. One morning, Mom left a voicemail, her voice softer, almost broken. "We never meant to hurt you. Your family." I listened, then deleted it. Not out of anger, but because I finally understood. Family isn't a debt you pay with pieces of yourself. It's a bond that should lift you, not bury you. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The snow outside kept falling, erasing the footprints of every path I'd taken to make myself smaller for them. I sat at my desk, the letter from Daniel catching the light, and felt something I hadn't in years: wholeness. Not because someone had finally seen me, but because I'd stopped begging for permission to see myself. I thought of all the years I'd folded my dreams, my worth, my voice, to fit their story. I'd soaked up their silence, their neglect, and turned it into fuel to keep showing up. But I wasn't born to be their mirror, reflecting their pride, or absorbing their indifference. I was born to be Maya, and that was enough. As the weeks passed, the silence became my own. It wasn't isolation. It was space, a canvas I'd never dared to claim. I kept doing the work that filled me, sitting with people whose stories reminded me why I'd chosen this path. I sketched again, filling notebooks with Puget Sound sunrises and the hands of clients mid-gesture, their strength captured in ink. I sipped ginger tea by the window, watching the city hum beneath its winter veil, and I smiled, not for anyone else, but for me. If you've ever felt like you had to earn love, like your worth was measured by what you could give, I want you to know something. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to build a life where you don't have to shrink to be seen. Love, real love, doesn't ask you to break yourself to keep others whole. It doesn't demand your silence or your sacrifice. It meets you where you are, whole and human, and lifts you higher. I used to think closing a door meant losing something. But that winter, I learned it can mean finding yourself. Sometimes the greatest act of love is the one you give yourself. The courage to walk away from a table that was never set for you. The snow fell outside, soft and cleansing, and I sat there, my tea warm, my heart steady. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for anyone to save me. I'd saved myself. And in that quiet, I was free.